Well, Seahawk fans, have I got a treat for you today. You know how we're always talking about how some of the national draft analysts, even the really, really good ones, have a difficult time projecting for each of the NFL teams because they just don't cover them intimately and have that daily knowledge of how that team operates. Well, Justin Melo is a little bit different. The lead writer for the Draft Network, he's going to join me today. He recently did a 7-round Seahawk mock draft that I thought was as good as anything that I've done or a lot of us Seahawks content creators and reporters have done on our own. So we'll get into a couple of picks that he had coming to the Seahawks in his mock that I think were a little bit different than what we've been seeing, and a couple of guys that stood out to me to get his opinion on. Also, Justin handles the interviews, the player interviews, almost 200 of them for the Draft Network. We know how important that process is to John Schneider and his staff in trying to identify future Seahawks. So a couple of his favorites that really stood out in that process that might tend to look and talk and act like Seahawks. And then we'll get his thoughts on this running back class. We don't expect the Seahawks to take a running back early, certainly, but it's such a deep and talented class. Who might be left on day 3 that would make sense for the team? Justin Melo from the Draft Network joining me today on Seahawks Forever.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
Shout out to Doer for sponsoring the program. Doer is built for doing lifestyle apparel for every occasion. Flagship stores in Denver and Los Angeles, or in the comfort of your own home at shopdoer.com. And these right here, these performance denim relaxed jeans are my all-time favorites. 20% stretch. They are breathable and light. They move with you. They're extremely comfortable, but you can wear them for everything because they're also built really tough. They're built to last. They're built for doing. And right now you can get 20% off your first order at shopdoer.com/forever. That's shopdoer, DUER.com/forever for 20% off your first order. All right, you guys, can't wait to get into this. Justin had a little bit of time to give me, which I really appreciate. This is such a busy time for these guys. Draft Network really went through an evolution a couple of years ago, some changes, a rebuild, if you will, after they built it up to be a real force in the scouting community. And then a bunch of their guys that built that thing graduated and went on to other networks and other high-profile jobs. And then a new wave of young guys came in. And there was a transition period, but Justin has really led the way there. They're doing some great work at the Draft Network. And then he has a really, really cool announcement at the very end of our conversation here about something new on the site that I think you're going to want to look into and play around with. Before we get to Justin, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell for notification of future episodes, and all the other ways you can support the channel are listed and linked down below in the description. All right, here we go. This is Justin Melo of the Draft Network. All right, Justin, really appreciate you joining me. Love the work that you guys do at the Draft Network over there. And I know that you guys are kind of in the home stretch after months and months of scouting reports and interviews. Can't wait to pick your brain a little bit. I know I don't have a whole lot of your time. But the first thing I want to do is you published a 7-round mock draft specific to the Seahawks about a week and a half ago. And I thought one thing that was really cool, and I'll post a full list of all your picks here, you really nailed a lot of names that Seahawk fans are becoming enamored with. And sometimes these national analysts just don't seem to really know what the hometown team would need or like or prefer. But you got a lot of names here that Seahawk fans are going to be familiar with. But I want to touch on a couple that maybe aren't as familiar. Savion Williams is a really intriguing receiver prospect out of TCU because the tools are fun. He's got such a varied skill set, but a kind of an unfinished raw project there as well. What do you like about Savion Williams?
Well, you nailed it, right? I think you fall in love with the skill set, if you will, and the size, right? The ability to stretch defenses vertically. That's something they lost, in DK Metcalf this offseason.
Sure.
And I'm not convinced they've done a good enough job replacing it. I know they went out to get, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who's got some history there with new offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak, and he is a guy that's made plays vertically down the field, but inconsistently throughout his career. Certainly not a like-for-like when you're talking about DK Metcalf, of course. They got some similarities there with JSN and Cooper Kupp. I think Williams would be able to come in and again, offer what they lost. You got to be able to keep defenses honest and take the top off. He's a big-bodied guy. The size is outstanding. It's really ideal to play the X position at the next level. And what's most intriguing about him is how he was used in that offense last year. 6 rushing touchdowns, matching how many touchdowns he scored as a receiver. So 12
Yeah.
total touchdowns. They used him in the backfield a lot. They had to get creative in that offense. Couldn't really field a traditional passing game based on the struggles at the quarterback spot. So you hit the nail on the head when you said he's not a finished product, but you love the size, you love the skill set. He was great at the NFL Combine. Again, there's some versatility there. You can move him around and do some different things as he sort of adjusts to playing a legitimate role at the next level. And what I mean by that is running a more complete route tree, right? Because those are some of the things he did not do at TCU, but it's easy to see why. And John Schneider's always, Tariq Woolen, he's always fallen in love, I think, with some of these height, weight, speed guys. He's hit a couple of them out of the park. I mean, remember when DK was coming out, there was a lot of talk about him not being a complete product. So when you can bet on athletic traits and hit at a high level, it's extremely beneficial. And Williams is that type of guy.
It's a cool pick to project because of what you touched on there, that, so many fans want to replace, a beloved player with a similar looking player. And there might not be one in this draft that looks more like DK Metcalf than Savion Williams coming out. You touched on Reek Woolen. You've got Darian Porter, the corner out of Iowa State, going to them in the 3rd round at number 82. We're certainly familiar here in Seattle with former wide receivers who made the conversion to cornerback. Of course, the most famous example of that's Richard Sherman, who was at the facility yesterday, and then Reek Woolen is another example of that. How close is Darian Porter to being a finished product at cornerback? Does he look like a guy who's been playing corner for a long time, or do you still see some of those examples of where the instincts aren't quite there because he hasn't played the position that long?
Yeah, I think there are still some bumps in the road when you watch his evaluation. But as you said, it was the same when you watched Woolen on tape, right? And the Seahawks pounce on him. I think that was in the 5th round and hit that one out of the park. So there are some similarities. This guy went to the NFL Combine and posted freakish testing numbers at his size. He was at the Senior Bowl. I thought he looked good in Mobile. I thought he was competitive. And remember, that environment, I say this every year, it's not great for a corner. It's really skewed to the receivers when those one-on-one practice reps. No corner loves a one-on-one practice rep when there's no simulated pass rush, right? You're really out there on an island by yourself without the help of a front 7. So I thought he did well in that environment. I think the tape is very encouraging, albeit inconsistent at times. But again, almost similar to Williams in a sense where you're falling in love with the measurements, you're falling in love with the athletic capabilities, and you know that maybe the rest is going to have to come later. But when you've got a strong-minded defensive head coach in a Mike Macdonald, someone who I would certainly trust to oversee the development of a player like Darian Porter, I think you feel a bit better about taking those risks. And certainly when you have a seasoned general manager like John Schneider, who's been doing this as long as he has, and again, has hit on a lot of these projections. I mean, you went all the way back to Richard Sherman, has hit on a lot of these projections in the past. Again, you kind of feel better about your hit rate and knowing or predicting which ones are going to work out and potentially which ones aren't. And a guy like Darian Porter, to me, makes a lot of sense why they would be intrigued in someone like him.
And then there's 2 other names that I'm intrigued by. One I'm familiar with and one I am not. I'll get to him in a second. But you have Dan Jackson, safety out of Georgia, going to the Seahawks in the 4th round. Safety is an interesting need in this draft because even though they're pretty well set with Julian Love and Kobe Bryant, we know how much Mike Macdonald likes to use 3 safeties. Jackson really impressed me in Mobile. He was obviously flying around hitting guys down there. Jack Besh probably still feels that hit in the end zone on that one play. But yet he doesn't get invited to the combine. And in these mock drafts, we're seeing him going in the 7th round at best sometimes. What is it about Dan Jackson that you think is worth a 4th round value?
Well, first of all, as I started getting, towards the end of this draft, I started looking at back end needs, right? And as you said, I do think number 3 safety is a bit of a need. If anything, they slightly downgraded there this offseason, right? I mean, at McDonald loved to use a 3, as you said. They cut ties with Rayshawn Jenkins, was a salary cap casualty. They went out, I believe they signed DeAnthony Bell in free agency. I don't, that's a bit of a downgrade, if anything. They're well set up. I love the 2 that they've got in Julian Love and Kobe Bryant. They're a bit of a corner safety convert, if you will.
Yeah.
But when it comes to Dan Jackson, it's rare that a Georgia guy doesn't get invited to the combine or is slept on, right? That's usually the story of a small school kid. Well, he doesn't get the invite, but he's got to control what he can control, right? He goes to the pro day and he puts up some of the best numbers among safeties, if you include combine participants in that study. So I thought he did what he did at the pro day at a high level. He flies around and hits, like he said. I think that's a good skill set for what the Seahawks typically look for, right? In a third safety. I think you want someone that's a bit versatile, but mostly can play inside the box towards the line of scrimmage a little bit. Almost like a box linebacker, if you will. So I think he's got a skill set they're looking for. And then in the fourth round, maybe it's a bit early, but I don't think this class is super deep at safety.
Right.
I think that's a guy, especially with the pro day, getting the bump that he did. All 32 teams are present at Georgia's pro day. So that was a big showcase for him. I certainly think he's worked himself into that early day 3 conversation.
Yeah, no one's skipping the Georgia Pro Day, at least not anyone that wants to keep their job. And then really intrigued by a 7th rounder that you threw at us, doubling down on receiver. This is a guy that I have not studied, caught passes from Cam Ward last year for the Miami Hurricanes, Sam Brown Jr. in the 7th round.
Yeah, again, this was more just about getting some depth. I don't think they're deep enough in that room. If they do use MVS as the number 3 receiver, they've got Jake Bobo and not a whole lot else once you get to that 4th spot. And with Cooper Kupp's injury history, I do think you need to have better depth there. Sam Brown is a guy that could come in. I think he's versatile enough to play the Z and the slot. This is not an X receiver, so he's not going to fill that role. But again, I was trying to look at someone that could maybe back up Cooper Kupp if necessary, and maybe even JSN, a little bit. Sam Brown's a little slight in the frame. I wish he had a bit more meat on the bone. I think that's going to prevent him from playing X at the next level. But again, I think he's a zone beater at Z and at the slot position. So a guy that could just come in, and I got some return ability as well from according to scouts that I've spoken with. I think he comes in and gives them good back end depth. You need to have guys on the roster that can back up your number 1 and number 2, right? And because they've got similar ones in JSN and Cooper Kupp, at least from a positional versatility standpoint. And I think Jake Bobo is more of an X, in my opinion, maybe competes with MVS for those boundary reps, if you will, assuming they don't add another X here in the draft.
Right.
I think Sam Brown comes in and plays a complementary role to JSN and Cooper Kupp.
And then I know I said just one more. I'm going to add one more to the one more little bonus here. You got Cody Lindenberg, inside linebacker out of Minnesota. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on his ability to cover, because in Mobile, really liked what I saw from him from a physical standpoint. He's great in the box. He really stood out in the pass rush drills. He's a longer, taller inside linebacker. Can he cover well enough to be able to play on 3rd down?
Everyone wants to make these prospects out to be perfect, right? I don't think that's going to be his game at the next level. I think when you get, these things all sound great as projections, but when you get to the NFL, you really find out how big, strong, and fast these guys are. So I'm not necessarily comfortable projecting him to be a coverage backer. I think Tyrese Knight still has some untapped potential in that area. By the way, I loved that pick last year. That was one I really hammered home for the Seahawks. And I was telling Seahawks fans early, this is a guy that I think is a steal of the draft. And I had said it throughout the pre-draft process that they liked him. I knew they liked him because he told me they liked him before the draft when I had a chance to speak with him. I like what they've got in the top 2 there in Tyrese Knight and Ernest Jones, but again, not a whole lot of depth behind them. So with the abundance of picks that they have, picked up a ton through the Geno Smith and the DK Metcalf trades. I think once you get to day 3, you can start filling some of those back end roles. And I think at linebacker, they do need a number 3, number 4 type, and also one that could play special teams. That's something that we often sleep on when it comes to A, linebackers, and B, back end draft picks. I think Cody Lindenberg's got a good 2-down skill set. I think he's going to come in, play downhill, impact the run game, high football IQ. He's aggressive. He knows how to attack holes and get into the backfield. Don't think he's going to be much of a cover guy, but I do think he offers something on special teams as well.
Well, I got to tell you, as I said, sometimes the national guys seem to miss when they go to specialize on a local team that they're not intimately familiar with or cover on a daily basis. I thought you hit it out of the park. Nice job. Couple things, other things I want to hit you with. I know one of the things that you really do well this time of year for the Draft Network is you kind of handle the player interviews, as you mentioned, and that's a big deal with the Seahawks evaluation process. It is for every team too, to varying degrees, but the Seahawks have made it a major emphasis ever since the stumble with Malik McDowell in 2017. As you've gone through some of these interviews, who's one or two guys that has really stood out to you as just A plus character that would scream a John Schneider type of football player?
Yeah, I know this is not a position of need for the Seahawks, but one that stuck out to me that I published very recently was Quinshawn Judkins, the running back from Ohio State. I mean, here's a guy who transfers in, has to share the football with Travion Henderson. They
Mm-hmm.
both rush for 1,000 yards. They win a national championship together. And in talking to Q and talking to people at the program, he never complained about the role. He was happy to share the rock with Henderson. I thought they did a good job with complementing skill sets. But don't get me wrong, practice was highly, highly competitive on a daily basis. That's what he told me. They were fighting for those reps, kind of thing, in a friendly, competitive kind of way. He's one, and I think at running back that is so important because the league is getting away from workhorses. I don't know if you're an NHL guy. I mean, you've got a new team there recently, a
Right.
recent team. So I'm an NHL guy as well. It's like when you're coming in, the workhorse running back. It's like the workhorse goalie in hockey. It's just not really a thing anymore. These teams nowadays, they have tandems. There's only so many Derrick Henrys in the
Right.
NFL. There are only so many Saquon Barkley. So I think as a running back coming out of college, it's almost imperative that you've had that experience where you've had to share the backfield because that more often than not's what you're going to do at the NFL. So for some of these guys who didn't have that experience in college and they were workhorses, they come in and they have a tougher time acclimating because now it's I'm number 2, I'm number 3, I'm touching the ball 10, 12 times a game when I was touching it 28 times a game last season. I think that experience is really going to help him, and I think he's got a dynamic skill set. I think he's fast, he's explosive, he can run between the tackles, he can exploit the edges. I'm a big fan of the football character that he showcased to me in that interview. And I've heard the same, again, from members at that program and scouts. I've done 175 interviews so far. So there are a lot of names I can give you that have impressed me. I mean, Jalen Royals is one, the receiver. I've heard great
Mm.
things about Gray Zabel. I know the Seahawks have shown a lot of interest in him. I'm
Yeah.
about to sit down with him very soon. I mean, I could go on and on. Jalen Royals, Utah State was one that impressed me. The two receivers at Iowa State, Jaden
Right.
Higgins, Jalen Noel. I've had a lot of high character guys this cycle. I'm very, very thankful.
It's a great segue to the last thing I want to pick your brain about with Judkins. Running back wouldn't seem to most fans to be a need here in Seattle. They have a pretty young, in fact, all 4 of the running backs on the roster at the moment are on their rookie contracts and a pretty deep running back room, but it's such a good class. You figure they have to tap into it at some point. So as far as it seems unlikely they would use a top 100 pick, one of those first 5 picks they have on a running back. But as far as day 3 goes, it's such a deep class. There's going to be some great value there on day 3. Who are a couple guys that stand out to you as really good fits in that outside zone scheme that might make sense here for Seattle?
Yeah, one that I really like, I'm not sure is getting enough attention, and it's such a deep class, it's easy for some of these names to get lost in the mix, is Dylan Sampson from
Hmm.
Tennessee. I spoke to him recently as well. He kind of came into that program. He had to sit behind some NFL worthy backs, right? He was behind Jalen Wright, who the Dolphins drafted, I believe it
Mm-hmm.
was last year. He was behind Jabari Small, even for a little bit, who might not ring as much of a bell if you're not a big college football guy. He ended up going as a UDFA to the Tennessee Titans. But Sampson had to sit and wait his turn, and he gets that opportunity. Rushes for, I think, what was 22 touchdowns last season. I mean, he had a big year for an explosive, Tennessee Volunteers offense. Getting lost in the mix a little bit, I do think he'll be an early day 3 guy. Another name I'll throw out to you that's probably a deeper cut that I really like, and I think Seattle, I don't know that they like him, but I think they would based on what I know John Schneider likes, is LaQuint Allen Jr. out of Syracuse.
Mm-hmm.
I think in last year's class, this is a 3rd round pick. I'm really high on him. He's been super productive. What I think Schneider will like about him, and why if they're going to take a running back, they might be able to figure out a role for him, even though they've got a room as deep as they do, is he's really good on 3rd down. He catches the ball at a high level, and he might be one of the best pass protectors in this class out of any of the running backs. He's going to be like a 4th, 5th, or 6th round pick from what I'm hearing. I think that's a lot later than he should go based on the talent that he has shown at Syracuse. I thought he was good at the combine, a solid pre-draft showcase, but because this class is so deep, he is getting pushed down the board a little bit. And, I chuckle. I think sometimes, Schneider can't help himself when it comes to drafting a running back, right? I think that room is deep. I don't necessarily think they should draft one, but I expect them to because of Schneider's history and because, as you said, they've got an abundance of picks. And when you've got 5 in the top 100, you don't feel so bad about taking a running back on day 3.
Sure.
Especially when it comes to taking advantage of a deep class. So LaQuint Allen out of Syracuse is one that I think might marry, need, if you will, because of what he does in pass pro with the value, because he's going to be available later than he should be.
Nice. Well, I need to let you get to other things. 2 weeks left. We're in the home stretch. A lot of heavy lifting has been done, but still some remaining. What can fans expect to see on the Draft Network between now and the draft?
Well, we just relaunched our mock draft
Yeah.
machine. I am so unbelievably excited about that. Of course, put yourself in the GM chair all 7 rounds. You could, depending on the status of your account with us, your subscription with us, you can make trades, move around the board. And I'll tell you, so much work went into this thing. We've got over 400 prospects there available for you to draft throughout all. You can pick how many rounds you'd like. You could even alter how quickly the draft moves. So if you're not as patient, you could hit the fast button and make sure it kind of fast tracks a little to your next selection. Pick the team that you want to be the GM for. I'm telling you, I've played around with it a lot. Again, so much work went into it. It's really accurate. Like the players that are available at those picks at the specific rounds, I think it's incredible. You're not seeing anything wonky like Abdul Carter's there at Seattle for 18 or anything like that.
Right.
The thing is super accurate. I'm absolutely in love with the way it looks and the way that it's operating so far. So head over to thedraftnetwork.com. Make sure you take it for a spin. The mock draft machine. I think it's the best on the market right now. Our top 100 big board, we just delivered an update a couple weeks ago. There will be one final update before the draft, but that's a top 100 big board. But we've got scouting reports on over 300 prospects. I'm dropping the interview series, as you said. I'm at the point where I'm running out of time. I'm publishing 3 a day right now because I'm just trying to get them all out before the draft. That's where we're at with that. So I can guarantee you, I've talked to a bunch of future Seahawks. Once they make those picks, of course, that'll become official. And then mock drafts. We're typically dropping 1 a week, but before the draft, every member of the Draft Network, every staff member we have will be releasing their final mock draft. We'll be submitting it to the Huddle Report, seeing how we do from an accuracy standpoint. So we've really got you covered from the mock draft machine to scouting reports to big boards to mock drafts by our experts. We've really got you covered, covering all your bases on the Draft Network.
Nice. Yeah. I plan to fire that machine up, the simulator, before Monday and do a big mock draft on Mock Draft Monday for the Seahawks. Really love the work you guys are doing over there, Justin. Keep it up. And I'd love to have you back after the draft and we'll break down who is actually picked by the Seahawks after all these months and months of speculation. Thanks for joining me, man.
It'll be my pleasure. You know where to find me. Happy to come back on and talk through the class.
All right. We'll see you then.
We'll see you.
Well, what do you guys think? Just to put it up one more time, I think the thing that Justin did that I don't necessarily agree with, I don't think the Seahawks are going to go back-to-back with guards or interior offensive linemen in their first 2 picks. But saying that, if the board should fall this way, if Tyler Booker is still on the board at number 50, he's a no-brainer pick for value there. That's just best player available, and you figure it out. Maybe at that point, Booker's a guy that slots in at left guard because that's where he played his entire career at Alabama. He's a natural fit there. Even though he's not an ideal scheme fit, he does move well enough. Saw it at the combine in the position drills, not necessarily the testing, but the on-field drills that he can get to the second level if asked to. And then maybe in this particular circumstance, maybe Zabel's a center instead of a guard, and you go Booker, Zabel, Haynes as the future of your interior offensive line. And then, Williams and Porter, we talked about. Terrence Ferguson's a guy we've talked about a lot here on the channel. Really athletic, pass-catching tight end. He's got some work to do as a blocker, but that's not what you're going to be looking for him to contribute with early in his career. And then we didn't talk about it because we here, and I have talked about him enough on the show, but Chase Lunt is a guy that you all know and has become a real favorite target of the Seahawk fans in mock drafts. Junior Tafuna is a guy that I rode on the airplane with from Dallas Fort Worth to Mobile for the Senior Bowl. Really, really liked chatting with him, and a versatile defensive tackle that can move around and play just about anywhere on the defensive line. So he makes sense. And then Brown is Lindenberg, as Justin pointed out. I think that's, for a national guy that does this for all 32 teams, pretty darn fine work from Justin. Can't wait to have him back to help me break down this draft class when it's all said and done. Less than 2 weeks away. A reminder that day 1 and 2 of the draft this year, I will do live draft parties all the way through. Bryce Coots of the Hawks Own Rundown for sure is going to be joining me on day 1. I'll have some other special guests drop in, and maybe even some members of the channel and some of my favorite viewers. But we have over 100 members now. If you want to sign up for one of those, you will get some exclusive content, including, as we get closer to the draft, a members only live chat with, and we'll do our own mock draft. But you'll get early access to some videos, including this one. So you may be watching it right now if you're a member before everyone else can, because that's one of the perks. So if you want to sign up for one of those, you can do that listed down below as well. In the meantime, subscribe to the channel, of course. All the other ways you can support it are listed down below. Also, follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Seahawks Forever. I'm going to take a Sunday, unless there's any breaking news, but we'll see you again on Mock Draft Monday, where we will put that Draft Network new mock draft simulator to use and do a mock draft. Not the final mock draft. That'll be a week from Monday when I do my final Seahawks mock draft, where I try to predict officially what I think they'll do. Lots to come in the next week and a half. Forever and always, go Hawks. Thanks for watching, you guys. Really appreciate it. We'll see you next time.